All right, so next we are going to start section 1.4 day 1. So the topic, section 1.4 day 1, essential question number 1, how do you name an angle? And essential question number 2, how do you find the measure of an angle? So those are the two things that we're going to talk about today. So if you need to pause anytime throughout because you're trying to copy things down, please do. But also remember that these essential questions are on the board in the topic, so you can always go back and copy those later. Okay, so first main idea usually is vocabulary, so here's our vocabulary. We got 3 vocabulary words here. So the first one is angle. So an angle consists of 2 different rays with the same endpoint. Then we have the sides of an angle. The sides of an angle are the 2 rays, or sometimes they can be segments as well. If they don't go on forever in, in the one direction, that's okay. That make up the angle. So you can have 2 segments also that make up an angle. And then we have the vertex of an angle. The vertex of an angle is the common endpoint that they have. So again, you can pause if I'm going too fast whenever, you're trying to write something down. All right, so I have an example here. So this would be an example of an angle. So you've got 2 rays. I've got ray BA and ray BC, and they have a common endpoint, point B. Okay, so this is an angle. The sides of an angle, let's name the sides of this angle. So I just did. I said the sides were ray BA and ray BC. So if they give you an example of an angle and they say name the sides of an angle, this is what you would do. So this one is ray BA, this is ray BC. Now if these weren't rays, they didn't go on forever. If it stopped at A, then instead of ray, you would write segment BA and segment BC. But these have arrows going on forever, so they're rays. Then the vertex angle, the vertex of the angle is the common endpoint of the 2 rays. And so notice that common endpoint is point B. So B is the vertex. I always kind of think of it as the hinge because that's kind of, you can make it bigger or smaller from there around that point. Okay, so that's what we're going to focus on today, are angles. So now we need to talk about what's the notation for naming an angle. Okay, so the notation for angle is like this little sideways L thing, and it's always facing open to the right. Now, notice there's only one angle here. Okay, so one way I can name it is just by its vertex. So that vertex point, one name I can give to this angle is angle B. I can use that vertex point. You can't just use this. If I say angle A, that wouldn't be the angle that I'm talking about here. Okay, or angle C, that wouldn't be this angle. So you use the vertex point to name the angle, just one letter. You can also use 3 letters. So I could do angle ABC, or I could switch them around and do angle CBA. Now when you're using 3 letters to name it, that middle letter has to be the vertex point. So again, if you're using 3 letters to name it, the middle one has to be the vertex point. If you don't put that, like if I tried to do something like CAB, well, that would be if I drew an angle so that it made up angle CAB. But I'm not drawing in any new angles. I'm just naming the angle that they showed me here. Okay, so this is 3 ways that you can name this angle. One other way is if, let's say they had put a number in here, like maybe they put number 1 in there. So if they put a number in there for you, then you would have a 4th way and you could just name it angle 1. But if they don't put a number in there, then you can't use that as something. Okay. Now, let's say they give you something like this. How many angles do you see in this picture? Hopefully you said 3, because there's an angle here, this angle right here. So we've got angle ZXW, or you could say WXZ. That's one angle right here. I've got this angle right here, so I could name that angle WXY or YXW. And then I've got the bigger angle here, angle ZXY, or you could go YXZ. That'd be the same angle. Now, when you have a situation like this where you've got 3 angles, so notice we have 3 angles that have the same vertex. They all have vertex X, so that's why X is in the middle for all of these. So I cannot just say, cannot use angle X as a way to name one of these angles. Since there are 3 different angles with vertex X, if I just said find the measure of angle X, like I wanted you to find how big angle X was, well, you wouldn't be able to know which angle I'm talking about if I just said angle X. So in a situation like this bottom picture, you have to use 3 letters to name your angle. If there's just a single angle like the top one, then you could use that single letter for the vertex to name your angle. Okay, but here I can't because there's 3 different angles that could be classified as angle X, so you would have to use 3 letters to distinguish which one you're talking about. All right, so right now, have the sub pass out the little sheet of paper that's just the protractor piece. It doesn't have the example written with it, so that you can glue this in your notebook. And this is actually part of your notes is where you'll glue it. So while you're waiting for that, though, let's write out the steps on how to measure an angle. Now this, remember, this signifies that we're doing a new main idea. So between what you just wrote earlier, this right here, and this, make sure you leave your 6 to 8 blank lines. Then write measuring an angle, that's your next main idea. And then we're going to write some steps, and then you'll paste this in the notes side here. All right, so how to measure an angle here. First, this is what we call a protractor. Okay, so this is a protractor. And you notice that there's numbers on the top, so you could use the numbers on the top, or you could use the numbers on the bottom. And so you have to choose which one you're going to use. So step 1, choose to use the top or the bottom numbers on the protractor. Okay, so you pick one. Can't use both simultaneously. You have to be consistent and pick either the top numbers or the bottom numbers. Second step, find the numbers that the rays of the angle go through. And so we'll do an example where I show you what each of these steps mean, but I want you to get the steps written down before we do the example. So second step, find the numbers that the rays of the angle go through. And the third step, then you'll subtract those 2 numbers and take the absolute value, because we're not going to be dealing with negative angle measures. All of your angle measures should be positive, so that's why we have to do the absolute value piece. So you subtract those numbers, which are coordinates on a protractor. You subtract those 2 numbers and take the absolute value. Okay. All right, so my little example that I'm going to show you over here is we're going to find the measure of angle BTD, and this is important notation right here. If I were just naming an angle like we were previously, so like earlier we were just naming an angle, where was it? Here. Notice I didn't put anything in front of the angle bar. I just put angle whatever it was. So when you're naming an angle, you just write it that way. Now, when you're trying to find the measure of an angle, the proper notation is that you put this little m in front of whatever angle you're trying to find. So remember I said geometry, it's really important that you use proper notation. This is one of those times. Okay, so measure of an angle, you put the little m in front. Okay, and measure of angles are always in degrees, at least in this class. When you get to trig, it might be a little different, but in this class, we're only doing degrees. And so let's follow the letter. So I want BTD. So I'm looking here. I'm looking BTD right here. Okay. So first step, choose to use the top or bottom numbers. I'm going to use the top numbers. Okay. So on my step 1, I'm going to use top. You don't have to write this. I'm just kind of writing it out so you can see where each step is. Okay, step 2, find the numbers that the rays of the angle go through. So notice I've got this ray TB. So ray TB goes through, on the top, 75. Okay, so ray TB goes through 75. Then find the other one, ray TD. Again, you don't have to write each of these steps. You should in your notes, but on every problem that you do not have to do this. So ray TD goes through 150 because I'm using the top numbers. You have to stay consistent. Okay, so that's step 2. Find where the 2 rays go through. What number does it correspond to? And then step 3, we're going to subtract them and absolute value them. So 75 minus 150. That is the absolute value of negative 75. So then the measure of angle BTD equals 75 degrees. That's how you're going to write your answers on tests, homework, and quizzes. And this little circle up here, that is your degree symbol. So that's the label that needs to go on all of your angle measures because we are going to measure in degrees. Okay? All right, next, so now this is a new main idea. So from what we just wrote down here, skip 6 to 8 spaces, and then we're going to classify angles. So this is classifying angles. That's our last main idea that we're going to talk about today. So classifying, then we have 5 different classifications here, and you've probably heard of these before. And so I'm going to give you the angle type, what the definition is, and a picture that goes with it, because I may just ask you to draw an acute angle on a quiz or test or whatever, and so you should be able to draw that. So I'll give you an example of a picture. All right, so an acute angle has to measure between 0 degrees and 90 degrees. It doesn't include 0 degrees and it doesn't include 90, but anything between that would be an acute angle. And so you just need to make it look like an angle that is between 0 and 90 degrees. Again, you can pause whenever needed. A right angle has a measure of exactly 90 degrees. It's not 90.1 or 89.9999. It is exactly 90 degrees. And so how the book will show you that, or if I ask you to draw a right angle, how you need to show me that is you have to put the box in there. Okay, so that box signifies that it is a perfect right angle. It's 90 degrees exactly. Then you've got an obtuse angle. Obtuse angles measure between 90 degrees and 180 degrees. Again, it can't include 90 and it doesn't include 180 degrees, but it's anywhere between there. And so then if I ask you to draw a picture, make sure you draw it so it looks like it's past 90 degrees. Okay. A straight angle has a measure of exactly 180 degrees, and a straight angle is that. It looks like a straight line. Okay, so, and it's a half a circle here. If I measured from here to here, that'd be half a circle, which is 180 degrees. Now, one you may not be too familiar with is what we call a reflex angle. A reflex angle measures between 180 degrees and 360 degrees. And so in my picture here, it's this part in green. This that I'm highlighting and running over with red, this would actually be the reflex angle. Now, we can't name reflex angles, but if I told you this was 45 degrees here, you would take a full circle 360 and minus the 45 degrees to get this angle. So that is a reflex angle. All right, so I'm out of time on this one. You have one more video that you'll have to watch to finish the example that we're going to have.